Many times throughout history, we see examples where an entire people group are basing their diet almost completely off of a single ingredient. Sometimes that's because it's the only thing that will grow in this particular geographical area, or sometimes it maybe is just the most cost-effective way that they can feed their family. But what happens if that ingredient suddenly disappears? In our world today, we have famine, we have crop failure, we have climate variations, and we have periods of time where the food that we're growing is not growing the way that it normally does. But we also have figured out over the last couple hundred years different ways to recover from those. And there's water storage, there are different fertilizers, there are things that you can do to help prevent that. But in the 18th and early 19th centuries, I'm not saying that they didn't have any answers, but there were often problems that they didn't have a large enough solution for, and people went without food. They just could not eat. They had to either relocate or starve. 1845 through the mid-1850s is known in Europe as the Great Famine, and this affected a lot of Europe, but very specifically, it just wreaked havoc in Ireland. And it's estimated that around 2 million people had to leave the area to find a new home, and they had to choose between that and starving. So this famine was caused by crop failure, potatoes specifically, and the crop failure was caused by blight. Blight is a fungal or bacterial infestation in plants, and it just kills everything if it is able to. And this season was particularly wet and humid, which causes blight to just grow very quickly. Not only does it hurt the plant, but it gets into the root system and can even, from what I understand, get into the soil. Now, I've read conflicting evidence of whether or not it will stay in the soil or not, but most things that I read says that it will. I did not grow up in a farmer's family. This is a little bit out of my depth, but I did grow up around farmers. And for an individual family in Indiana, I know how much crop failure can affect them. But imagine an entire country, a whole landmass, an island that loses its cash crop. And not only its cash crop, but the crop that the entire civilization is used to eating. This is their diet. This is their food, and it is gone. It's estimated that 50% of Ireland relied on potato for a lot of their diet, but in Western Ireland, it's likely that most everybody relied on potatoes for their entire nutrition. That's all they ate. What we want to do today is take this ingredient that they so desired in this time period, but they could not get their hands on, and we want to say, okay, if they could have, if this family could have gotten their hands on just a few potatoes, what would have been a real treat for them? And so we don't want to make the lowest of low dishes, but we want to make a couple of potato dishes that are a little bit elevated. They're not the fanciest thing in the world, but man, are they good. And this would be a real feast to someone who was craving potatoes and could not get them. All three recipes that we're going to do today come out of the same book, even the same page, which I don't think has ever happened before. It's The Universal Cook by Francis Collingwood and John Wollums, and it was written in 1792. The first one is to fry potatoes. To fry potatoes. Having cut your potatoes into thin slices as large as a crown piece, fry them brown, lay them in a plate or dish, and pour melted butter and sack and sugar over them. For this first recipe, we're just going to take our potatoes, we're going to cut them into thin slices. It says about the size of a crown piece. We're going to fry them until they're brown, take them out and put them in whatever we're going to serve them in, a bowl or a plate. Put some melted butter, some sack, which is a fortified white wine, and then put a little bit of sugar over top. When potatoes first came to Europe, people were a little nervous about them. They're a member of the nightshades family, and so they were primarily grown in botanical gardens. People thought that they were a beautiful plant. They liked to look at them. They wanted to study them, but they were not quick to eat them, even though they knew people in other parts of the world were eating them. The fruit of a potato plant is poisonous. People knew that. They were afraid of that. They weren't gonna say, well, I'm just gonna eat the root right away. They're gonna wait off a little bit. And so they fed them to livestock, and they eventually became poor people food. As poor people food, folks in Europe were really excited about this because it is a high yielding crop and it's fairly calorically dense. So they could feed a lot of people and they don't really have to worry about running out of potatoes, so they thought. It was replacing things like turnips. It was replacing other other staple crops because they were able to feed a lot of people, and you can do a lot with potatoes. I mean, a lot of circumstances, you could just boil them and there's food. So they were using this as poor people food, they were using this as livestock food, and eventually folks warm up to potatoes and it starts even making its way to the highest tables. The second recipe for today is something that we're all familiar with if you've ever had a Thanksgiving dinner, and it is called to mash potatoes. To mash potatoes, boil and peel them and put them into a saucepan. Mash them well and put a pint of milk to 2 pounds of potatoes. Add a little salt, stir them well together, and take care that they do not stick to the bottom. Then take 1/4 pound of butter, stir it in, and send them up to the table. For this second recipe, we're just gonna make some mashed potatoes. So you're going to either peel first or second, but you need to boil your potatoes, and you're gonna put them into a saucepan and mash them up with milk and salt. And then after they're mashed, you're gonna make sure that they don't stick to the bottom of your saucepan, and you're gonna add the butter, stir it all up, get it nice and incorporated, and then they go up to the table. Now, during this big exodus from Ireland, a lot of people were coming over to the New World. I've read a few different numbers. It seems like right about 500,000 are documented, somewhere between 400,000 and 500,000. But they also estimate that a ton of people came over that were not documented, and it's likely that somewhere even maybe around 1.5 million came to America during this major movement from Ireland. And that is a lot of new people, all from the same culture, that are coming here and they're changing food in America. Primitive Cookery is a book that we lean on a lot because it's specifically made for folks to be able to have more affordable food. They really kind of go into explaining why the ingredients are good for poor folks. In this particular example with potatoes, they're talking about all the different ways that you can eat them. You can boil them, you can slice them and fry them, you can use them with a gravy or with a ketchup. You can put milk and sugar on them and make them kind of a sweet thing. And he's basically saying the poorest of the poor, they're gonna boil it and just put some salt on it. And as you kind of increase in income, then you start bringing in butter, you start bringing in sugar, milk, cream. So this is an ingredient that can grow with your income because of what you're adding to it, but it is good for all classes. The poorest of the poor to the richest of the rich are enjoying potatoes. This last recipe is kind of building off of ideas from the second recipe, and it's called to scallop potatoes. We're going to make a potato mash, but we're gonna do something extra special with it. To scallop potatoes, first boil your potatoes and then beat them in a bowl with some good cream and a lump of butter and salt. Put them into scallop shells. Make them smooth on top, score them with a knife, lay thin slices of butter upon the top of them, and put them in a Dutch oven to brown. For our scallop potatoes, we're going to make a mash again, but it's gonna be a little bit different. We're gonna put them into a bowl this time, not a saucepan, and we're gonna put to them some good cream like it says, some butter and some salt. We're gonna mash them all up, and then once that's done, we're gonna put them into these shells. And we're gonna put them in the shells and make them look smooth on top. And then we're gonna take our knife and we're gonna score them so that they look like a shell as well. And when that happens, we're gonna slice some butter, we're gonna put that on top and get them into a Dutch oven so that the top of the potatoes browns. And it's gonna be a real nice treat when these come to the table. They're gonna look really great. It's easy today to look at a potato and kind of write it off. It's easy to say, that's just filler food, or I'm tired of potatoes, especially if you've ever been in a situation where things were a little tight and you ate a lot of potatoes. You can be one of those foods that you're sick of. But what we want to do today is just celebrate this ingredient. These people in this time moved their entire life because potatoes would not grow, and that's what they needed. So we wanted to make some nicer dishes with them, and we're gonna give them a try right now. I'm not really sure what to expect out of this fried potato because I have never had fried potatoes with sack and sugar before. Let's get one. That's really, really interesting, and it's really good because you've got this kind of just a little bit of sweetness to go with the normal buttery potato, but the frying makes it really crunchy, and that's really nice. It's kind of like a potato chip with just a little bit of sweetness. Now, mashed potatoes. I'm a Midwest boy. I've had my fair share of mashed potatoes. So I don't think there's gonna be any surprise here. Nope. Fantastic. Milk, butter, salt. That's all you need. This one I'm not so sure about. I don't think I've ever made mashed potatoes with heavy cream. And this is like a twice baked potato, so kind of cool. Let's see what's going on here. I got some crusty. Much more rich than just the mashed potato. And I like that crust and that like kind of brown cooked area on the top. This is delicious. Any one of these you can try at home. They're fantastic. I think that you will really like them, especially try this fried potato with sugar.